All right, man, we're live. Good to see you,
Joe
brother.
Tip. What's up, Joey?
Ready to
How you been?
rock
It's
and roll, man.
been a week, right? 7 days since I've holla holla. We had a few
Yeah,
texts back and forth. You told me what
yeah,
topic to talk on today. How you
yeah.
been?
Good. Yeah, enjoying life, man. It's been hot down here in Tennessee, but it's good, dude.
I
Enjoying
like the
myself.
weather. I love the weather too. We've been in the 90s, high 90s. I've been told by some clients in the area in Ann Arbor that this is very rare that it gets this hot here in the
Uh-huh.
90, 95, 99. We saw 100 degrees, close. That's cray cray. But I'm
Yeah.
enjoying it. I actually messed up a little and tried to do a 3 mile aggressive run, and it was 92 degrees outside. And you can touch on heat exhaustion if you do that and make yourself sick. So don't
Yeah.
do that. If don't overdo the body, because I was
Yeah.
planning on, oh, it's going to be 100 degrees in a few days. I'll try it again. And I was like, nope,
Yeah.
92 is enough. So know your limits, right?
Yeah, I hear you. I did that yesterday myself. I went for a run and it was still early enough in the morning that wasn't terrible, but yeah, I felt it, dude. I felt it.
It's a
So,
good thing, but that balance. So yeah, what is up, man?
yeah,
What's the
yeah.
topic?
So today we're talking about music and the expressions that come through us as music, and how the music is correlated to chakras, and why music is so important in our lives. And we're going to talk a little bit about using musical terms outside of music in a certain sense, talking about like having a rhythm in life, knowing what our pace is, our tempo, knowing how we're harmonizing with others, and those kinds of things, man. So,
Well, at
yeah,
first, when you brought it up, I wanted to be resistant. When you texted and said music, I'm like, man, what? What do you mean? And then I sat with it. I wanted to be like, let's do something else, because I'm not familiar with how to talk about it. But then, just as similar as though if I had a speaking event, I started thinking about the subject and thinking about the topic and taking down notes. And I was like, wow, there's actually a lot to music. Music makes the people come
yeah,
together, right? Was that
yeah,
Madonna or whoever?
I,
Music makes the people come together, man, and it
uh-huh,
does
hmm
in a plethora of ways. I had it written down somewhere else. I was watching with my children. We rented from Redbox Trolls, and the Trolls movie is all about different genres of music, and these little trolls are competing over. And the heavy metal rock troll wants to take over all the different dimensions of music and
oh
kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
superimpose it and take it over with its own. And at the end of the troll movie, it's like, we should celebrate, basically the country, the punk, the rock, the whatever. They name like 7 different classic and all of it. And I was like, this is perfect right now for preparatory. So I say that, and music makes the people come together. And also, what comes to the top of my mind is everything is, the Lord said, through sound, creation was created. So frequency and vibration is a very significant thing. And then harmony and music. Now, you're a musician. I have a guitar, but I've never become skilled with it. So I don't know music like you know music. But as with any subject, there's a spiritual aspect to this. Perhaps, I know I've experienced it, perhaps you have as well, in certain meditative, when you get into a meditative place in your heart and mind, you almost hear a humming sound or a frequency. So one of my friends called that the sound of silence,
hmm
and that very tranquil energy. So I have about 4 or 5 things that I already took notes on that I'd like to discuss. And I'm glad I didn't give you, you don't know these subjects I'm going to bring up, right? So I want to see
okay,
how you
yeah,
respond. I want to see how you respond to them.
all right, yeah, man, absolutely, absolutely.
But I would like you to
Uh,
present your topic of interest regarding the music umbrella right now. And go ahead, you have it, man.
Well, one of the things, first of all, I want to say is as much as I love music and as much as I've played music, it is not something that I know a ton about. Um, I'm a self-trained lover of songwriting as opposed to
Musician,
a
man. You're a musician.
musician. Yes, that's one of those things that's taken me longer in life to claim as a piece of identity as musician. I still feel more comfortable expressing myself as songwriter, because a lot of times people be
Yeah.
playing music, and if somebody hands me a guitar or whatever, I'm not exactly going to know what to do. I'm going to have to listen around, try to find what it is that I'm doing. Um, that said, what has always drawn me into music was I would say it's like the connection to emotion, right? Music does one of two things. If I'm like oversimplifying, I'm saying one is that it changes the mood we're in. Like if somebody's in a bad mood, one of the best ways to kind of change the way someone's feeling is to let's put on some music of a different vibe, right? To make ourselves feel better. So the other thing would be to deepen a feeling that one already has, which can be good, or that could be a little, you know, if we're angry and we pop on some more angry music, we could get deeper into anger. So I think like with anything else, we should be mindful of the things we put in our ears, right? Uh, so I teach a lot about music with my seniors classes, and I do a lot of music with the groups, and it's such a wonderful thing to bring people together. And if we look at what like the whole idea of a concert is, it's bringing a massive group of people together to watch some people play some songs that people in the audience are dancing to, and they start moving. So music moves us, and to move means to change the way we're feeling. And that's very important because, again, we get back to the idea of the frequency, which is a movement, basically. And as humans, one of the things that we can do to change any sort of mental or emotional state is either move our bodies or, you know, when we pop in music, a lot of times we get up and we start dancing. So music often initiates movement. So yeah, I'll pass it all back to you. You know,
well, you hit on two of the five things, and I put some little marks by it about how you can get in a zone with music, and it can be stimulating. Like in college baseball, we each were able to pick out our song when we're going up to bat, right? And so then you're playing your song just for a few seconds,
right?
But those few seconds are like, and what does that do to that moment? You're getting in your like mode, right? You're getting into your,
right.
So this is one I want to peel back some layers here, because I've actually wrestled with something from a spiritual perspective about music. And of course, having children, you think about the purity of gospel music or something that's really seeking to exercise reverence in everything that it expresses, and reverence to the Lord, reverence to divinity. Not always woe is me, but like grace abounds, man. You know, and sacred music, we'll call it, of forms of the hymnals that point toward, let's call it even contemporary Christian worship music. Even though to a certain extent, it grows into secular, you know, they blend each other. There's a certain energy when I go on a 5-mile jog, if I have contemporary Christian worship music on. This is one of the topics I wanted to bring up and ask you about. And I like hip hop. I like certain, you know, other types of music. And so let's say I put on some Drake or whomever, that's some good top hit beats, and it's more fleshly. There's a difference in the jog if I'm listening to the sacred music or the fleshly music. And I found them both to be good at different times in my life, or depending on how I'm feeling. More so than not, especially as I continue to mature, it seems like I long to the sacred music more, where it's pumping up something greater than me while I'm running 5 miles. I'm not saying contemporary music that I'm saying is fleshly is bad, but it does something different if you do and I'd like you to elaborate on that. Like, let's say I'm listening to some of Drake's top hits, or whoever, man, that's just really good beats. You know, it's probably a lot of those artists, it's not even their beats, right? They bought their beats and they put their lyrics to it, right? Yeah. And so you're like, it's designed to make you go, yeah. It's like a pep rally. That sacred music's not so much designed to do that. But if you can let it move you, you'll go into a different place that's somewhat more selfless, it seems.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll say this, and you have it. Sometimes, let's say I'm doing a 5-mile jog, 2.5 mile mark, and I come back. Sometimes I'll do the sacred music to the 2.5 mile mark, and then I'm like, all right, we're going to switch it over. And it's like I'm being hardcore. Or switching up, and it's a different vibe.
Right.
When you do too much of the fleshly music, you can feel it hurt you and deteriorate you.
Yeah.
There's a difference. What do you think?
I'm with you, man. And I think a lot of times what happens with music, which can either be transformative in a healthy way or transformative in a more catabolic way. And that's the idea that, you know, like, let's say the blues, right? When you listen to the blues, a lot of time when you're listening to it, you're like, yes, this feels really good. And like, there's something like, there's something uplifting about the blues, right? And if you listen to the lyrics, though, it's kind of like it can be very. It would almost be depressing if you just read the lyrics and didn't have the music to go with it. So a lot of times you can almost it's almost like a mixed signal, right? Music can create a lot of mixed signal.
There's a
And
historical capture with like something like jazz or blues that's capturing a moment in history where certain things were happening, and the music captured it almost as a poetic expression, right? Like the beat
right,
poet thing. And
right,
so it's artistically expressing what's going on. It's a byproduct of what's going on in that moment in that culture. And
right,
so when you
right.
listen to blues, you kind of start to sit back in that state that they're in. I
Uh-huh.
interrupted you. Go ahead.
Well, basically, it's just kind of like how it is an expression, and it's a poetic expression. And I think a lot of music is very therapeutic. So if somebody's angry, sad, any of the negative, dark emotions, I'd rather call them dark emotions instead of negative, because they're kind of just what they are. But if somebody's angry, sad, you know, whatever, to write it out, to create music helps to get it out of us, just like writing in a journal.
That's
That's it.
almost like poetry. You're saying to do lyrics seems a lot similar to me from a literature perspective as doing poetry,
Yeah,
because and
sure.
rhyming it and all. Go ahead. And
So
that's different than actually just sitting as an observer being
yeah, imbibing it and being hit by it.
by the music.
So
Go ahead. Go ahead.
um so you know what I wanted to say is this: with the technology and with just the mass production of music over, let's say, the past like 100 years, and especially in the past, I don't know, since maybe the 50s, it just keeps ramping up. More and more music, and more pushing of music, advertising of music, more ways to keep listening to it over and over and over again. Whether it was the record, you could just keep putting that record on, listen to it over and over and over again. There's a difference to me sometimes between expressing your stuff, your feelings privately in musical form, and then taking some of those expressions and then mass producing them. Eminem is one of those guys that when I first listened to him, my brother actually introduced me to him because I had no interest in him at all. But then I started listening to it, and I had this mixed feeling of how poetic it was, how powerful it felt, and yet at the same time there was a feeling in my soul of like, yeah, but there's something dark here that I don't know that I need to just continue to listen to over and over again, or else this is going to take me down.
That's the
So,
magic of the music itself that both draws you in, and the phenomenon of you love the hit song for like 2 or 3 weeks and then you got to change it off the radio. You can't stand it.
yeah, yep, and
I tell you what I
yeah,
want, what I
right.
really, really want, when that
Oh,
comes on,
right.
like I told the Spice Girls song, and a few of my campers in the back were like, leave it on. And a few of the other people were like, turn it off. And I'm like, some of you guys like this song, some of you don't. I interrupted you, but I wanted to
Yeah,
complain
all
about
good.
being a personal trainer. One of my least favorite things of being a personal trainer, but I love
Yeah,
everything about it, is having to be a DJ and
yeah,
keep finding the right music that stimulates a crowd that is not of one mind or one
no.
listening or one stimulus.
Well,
Heavy metal, death metal. Some
yeah.
of my buddies, I could name 5 of my buddies that love the Weight Train to that.
Right.
And you're like hardcore, and like I can get it for a second. I've also
Yeah.
read in books that will rip your sacral chakra energy frequencies because it's so aggressive.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I have these other points to make, but please go, because I'm going to bring them up eventually. I want to see where you go with these
Well,
questions.
I was gonna say absolutely. Some of that music, it's like you just don't want to listen to it because you feel like it's like depleting you. Like I remember one time when we first met, you were talking about heavy metal music and how, if you were to go to like a heavy metal concert and sit there, when you got done, you'd feel like, oh, just like it just all your energy and everything is just like gone. You're like, I'm dead. I'm just like done. Um,
And then
which
some people are nourished by that have certain experiences in their adolescence, are drawn to that as a kind of like a release of that energy center. And then for me, it feels like I'm being almost tortured, like a form of audio torture. Like, and we can talk about dubstep and other forms of, I can't remember the new contemporary
Right.
Beyond,
I know,
I'm not
trap
even getting into.
music and all this stuff. I'll be honest, man. I don't stay up on all the lingo that well either. But one thing I did want to say was how it's interesting as creatures. We're sort of like an antenna that's receptive to music sometimes and not other times. So the same song I might want to hear like right now, but 2 hours from now it'll be totally not what I want to hear. So we're kind of fickle as receivers of
We
music.
are. We're temperamental, like the
Yeah.
thermostat. And if it adjusts just a little bit, we want to shoo it out. We might have heard a word in it that changes our whole view of the song. You brought up listening to Eminem, and it was introduced to you by your brother, and then you were like, dude, what? And then later you're like, really, you admire the qualities. You saw the artistic expression of Eminem.
It was kind of a bold. It's kind of like, man, I like it, but should I be liking this? Is this really healthy for me? Man, it gets me pumped up when I'm trying to do a lot of bench press, you know. But
Well, I had that experience with Bob Dylan,
uh-huh.
and my good buddy Bob Howell. He kept
Yeah.
blasting Bob Dylan when he was hanging out with me in the house. And I'm like, man, what the hell is this music? Just watching the river flow. And at
Right.
first it was like literally my ears. It was this dissonance in my ears. I was like, what? All of it, the harmonica, the guitar, his voice. And then within a matter of weeks when we're hanging out, I was like, man, I think I understand what Bob Dylan was just talking about. His lyrics touched me. And then I was like, yeah. And then I was starting to want to hear more and more of his songs. I had that happen for a season of my life with the Doors and Jim Morrison.
Yeah.
Because there's a fine line with music, you know.
Right.
Then you put on the hat of being an adult, a parent, and thinking about your children.
Yes.
So
yes.
since I've had my children, I only play Christian worship music in my house. When they're here, every once in a while I'll put on a little bit of stuff that I like that's adult. Mm-hmm. But it's that I don't want my children exposed to it, but I will expose myself to it. What's up with that? But it feels right. But I don't want my 7-year-old son hearing what Drake is saying in that song, or Kanye or whoever. But you're like, yeah, that's right. That's right. What is that?
Well, there's a lot of things. And I mean, I do think music, a lot of is more about age appropriate. And I think that even as adults, we should be very careful about what we put in our ears. You know, eyes and ears are our audio diet, so to speak.
It's true.
Yeah,
I have a point from getting through my graduate work because I was overwhelmed with the syllabus load. I was doing 15 hours. I should have only been doing 12 hours probably. But you remember thousands of pages of reading per week of thick, dense theology. This wasn't like reading a kid's book, man, right?
No, not at all.
And I remember having to be like, if I'm going to make it through this, I have to commit to that library over there. What is that library? I have to go find a place in that library, and I have to sit for 6 hours and study 3 or 4 times a week, or this isn't happening. Right. And classical music saved my butt. Classical music became this, because I just, you know, how overwhelming it could be with the big task and how am I going to do this? I'd put on, and I learned, and this is a distinction, I learned that I could not do deep study to music with lyrics. I could only do deep study to music with instruments. Right. Because those words would infiltrate my reading process.
Yeah.
When I was absorbing. But when it was classical, it's almost like I would begin to read and flow with what the music was doing to me. And before I knew it, 4, 5, 6 hours was gone by. And I was like, that's enough Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach. And then you're sick of it. And you don't want to hear classical music. But for that study box, it became an alternative source of calming part of my brain down so I could focus on another part of my brain. What do you want to say about that? It was keeping me going. It was rhythmic.
Well, and music it activates or tames down the animal. And as animals, you know, it's like nice to hear something that soothes us. Like if we're studying, you know, we don't want something too sleepy, but we don't want something too upbeat. And there's so many, you know, there's so many musics, so many different songs.
Well, let's talk about
feelings that can
Let's not talk about frequency yet.
Okay.
So many feelings can be pulled up, but beats per minute, Joseph, as a trainer and a group fitness instructor, 125 to 155 beats per minute stimulates the human to want to move. Right. If the song that comes on the radio, so when I'm selecting through songs, if I don't have a playlist for a group fitness class, I'm not really caring who's singing or what, other than I'm waiting for this beat.
Mhm.
And I need the something beat,
Right,
and something
right.
that's more than 125 beats per minute, or my audience that's trying to lift weights is going to go lethargic on me.
That's right. That's right.
Isn't that strange? And that's
Yeah.
almost subconscious. That's subconscious almost. You're not in control of that. You're just like,
I know, and that's why having those certain beats on top of certain lyrics, we got to be careful. And you're talking about children. We're talking about children too. Music.
Thank you. You're so right.
Music has, often carried a lot of, let's say, sexual undertones. There's been a lot of that, like suggestive language. Nowadays, most of the mainstream media is so hypersexualized and explicit, so explicit, which is, I think, definitely affecting children. We're getting a little breakup in our connection right now. Can you still hear me well?
I'm good. You glitched just for a moment, but I don't think it was anything significant.
So, that's one of those things that I think is something that we should be mindful of if we have children. I mean, do you want your 8-year-old, 6-year-old, 10-year-old listening to some stuff that we hear on mainstream radio, or on the television? That's the culture in many ways. And, rather than necessarily completely demonizing it, I think it becomes a lot about the parents moderating it, but it's really hard as a parent to control it when it's infiltrated
That's why I
culture
quit
so much.
listening.
Yeah.
That's why I quit listening to so much contemporary music, Joseph, because my daughter's in the back seat, my son right next to me, and I'm a bad guy. That one song, Bad Girl, whatever song it can be. I could pick 100 that are very fleshly and seductive in their whatever they're saying. And my daughter's like, Dad, why did you turn that off? I like it. I'm like, no, you did not like that. Let's put it back on the Christian worship songs.
I know.
Because you're wanting to keep it as, you don't want them to be curious, and you don't want them to be exposed to that at a premature age. And as a father, you want to protect them from because it can hurt them. I talked about the death metal music can cause tears in your energy fields where other people enjoy it. We're all, the military has weapons that use sound to destroy and disperse crowds, and you're like out of there. Right. And think about, it's all about, if you're enjoying music, it's at the right volume. Mm-hmm. It's somehow balanced with this treble and bass. There's got to be a lot of things harmonizing for you to actually enjoy it.
Right.
Getting back now to frequency and hertz, each of our energy centers have a different hertz they're calibrated into. So are the chords on your guitar, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you strum that guitar, Joseph, your energy center parts of them harmonize and resonate.
Resonance, yes.
Resonance with that guitar string.
Right.
And when it's done right, you're like, if you sit in front of a John Thornhill, if he ever watches this, is one of the best guitarists I've ever known personally, just amazing. And it used to be a Methodist worship leader, probably still is with his guitar. He's so passionate with his guitar when he's playing and singing about the Lord. You're drunken and awestruck by what's coming out of the combination. Mm-hmm. And he's not even trying. It's just natural for him. Right. And so that's a significant thing where people are able to grab an instrument and make something from the heavens come out, making a joyful noise unto the Lord. Right. That have the gift to use an instrument as well. Paul Syke, if he ever watches this video, I've never seen a man work an organ like that. He has a degree in organ playing, for a Methodist. And on the piano, the ability that man has will make you literally you'll get chills and you'll almost be nauseous. Oh, he's sung in Broadway in New York. So he's singing and the key, and I'll use this, man. The best time when you're running is when you forget you're running. Mm-hmm. You forget you're jogging. When you're jogging and you're like, I hate this. I'm dying right now. You're not in the place of what running's supposed to do for you. When you're going and you actually forget you're even running, there's a zen. There's the runner's high, perhaps is what that's called. The musicians I've been fortunate to be exposed to and around, when you watch them just even practice and not even on stage, they almost embody the instrument and they become fused with it and one with it. Yeah. And you're sitting there like, wow, man, I should take piano lessons or something.
Yeah.
because of how magical they are with their embrace of that. And it's like a thumbprint. Every person with each instrument is so
Oh,
unique.
absolutely, man. And it's like
It,
when we watch sports and people are just so in tune with what's going on. It's like it's so natural, and there isn't. It's not about thinking. It's just you're in that zen. And yes, when people get that way musically, it's mesmerizing, man.
well,
You watch their
about
bodies and what's going on. You're just like, you're like just drunk on it.
based,
Oh my God.
it's the truth. It's the truth. My kids give me reasons to sing abruptly and very annoyingly, like I'll yodel or something, and I know I can't sing. And they're like, "Oh, Dad, stop." So what is a dad gonna do, man? Well, I'm gonna yodel
Yeah.
twice as loud.
Right,
And there's
right.
like, being so terrible of a singer, I'm actually enjoying singing.
Uh-huh.
Last week we talked about sports, and we're like, we encourage people, pick up a sport. You may not be the best, the pro, the ultimate, the gold star, whatever, but
Right.
pick it up and enjoy it. I think there's something to be said about doing that with an instrument that you enjoy.
Right.
And there's a
Yep.
therapy to it if you take time. Like I had calluses a few times and got into it. And I was like, I can see where I could break through with this.
Yep.
So we should probably encourage listeners, if they play whatever they play,
Mm-hmm.
like I busted out a recorder in 4th grade. I was really good at that. But whatever you choose to play, maybe pick up the instrument again or the music. What do you want to say here? And I have a big question for you
Yeah.
about music.
To be in that zen is phenomenal. For me, music has been something I've always loved so much, but I would say in terms of like my top 5 talents or whatever, it's not there. That's not the thing that I learned as a child. I didn't pick up an instrument till I was about 19 years old. I didn't have anyone really in my family that played music. My grandmother played a little bit of piano, like maybe 10 times in my life I remember on a piano. Other than that, like, no one in my family did it. So I didn't grow up around it really. My family, like nobody really was like a dancer. So for me, it was always about overcoming a certain amount of self-consciousness to be able to be good at music. And
Performing.
the things that would mess me up so much would be intrusive thoughts while I was playing, or thinking about, how the person that was watching was perceiving this. The other,
Yes.
the
And then
other,
you're not.
then you're not there, and then you're like listening through their ears in a certain way that's weird.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's like the thing about music that I really had to get over was just like with sports. I'm not perfect at it. Like, and you're not gonna be perfect. And there's always gonna be a lot of people that are much better than you. And that's fine. And it's kind of like at middle school dances. You remember the guys get on one side, the girls get on the other side, and then
Oh yeah.
there's
I
very
do
few
remember.
people that
Oh,
would
yeah.
dance because everybody's worried about how do I look while I dance. And you could always tell by watching when somebody dances who's being self-conscious as they dance. So to start to express oneself through singing, through playing, through dancing, you are opening yourself up to critique. But that is the only path to being able to get good at it. I know a lot of actually really good musicians who I think sometimes don't play the music that they'd like to play because I think we all can get stuck in some sense of we're still not good enough.
You made me want to say, I don't know if a lot of musicians can even dance to the own music they create, because it's a different hat, man. When you're
It
over
is a
there,
different hat. Yeah, for sure.
and then now that song that's the top hit. All right, instrument dude, put your instrument down. I'll go dance to it. They'd be like, what? No, I'm gonna go play. Yeah, dude. And you're also known as a performer and entertainer. Like a buddy of mine I spoke about earlier that was really good at the piano. He'd get hired for dinner parties to play the piano while everyone else would socialize. So over time, he's over there like, man, I want to socialize too, because he's just entertaining with the keys.
Right.
And so over time, it became a gig and a job, and laborious and tired and cumbersome.
Right.
We've talked about ojo before and the I.
Mm-hmm.
In Espanol, my sister-in-law Danielle Hessman taught me about this. The Espanol word I, ojo, ojo. Mm-hmm. And a few times there were kids around, and we were hanging out in the family, and the infant or toddler was sickly and irritated, and Danielle would say, there's just too much oho on that child, too much oho. And I'm like, what are you talking about? From where she was brought up in her culture somewhere, you can exhaust a person's energies by, oh, the baby. Let's say 20 people come over and try to help the baby.
Yeah.
But by even observing the baby and looking at the baby, and they're actually getting an energetic exchange, and that little infant can't handle all that energy.
Right.
I'm going to say transference, or even just the forward loop of it that you would expect from an adult to adult, overwhelms that baby.
Yeah.
And the baby's just fried, but all the adults are trying to help. Too much oho.
Yes.
That changed how I trained in the gym. You remember we talked about training in the gym and forgetting everyone else. This is your time. Don't be looking around, seeing who's doing what.
That's right.
Your time. So here's my question from earlier. And this is, about, I have maybe one or two other points here. Mm-hmm. How come when someone gets really, really good at music, and let's use rock stars. Let's use Ozzy Osbourne. Whoever.
Right.
Why does it go there to so much drug and sex and party with nearly all the amazing and talented, talented musicians, even some of them to the points of suicidal ideology? I can explain a little bit that you're in the limelight and then you got to go home and be normal. But I mean, there's this thing of, my question is, what about the rock power of music that almost kills a famous person?
Yeah.
It'll kill you, man, if you get really good at music.
Well, I think because a lot of times, I think that the drug and alcohol use, a lot of it is to help people get outside of their own insecurities. Now,
to continue performing.
Because the oho can be a lot, and they're better sometimes alone doing their thing. And I know that I'm a different musician when I'm playing by myself than if I'm going out and performing in front of people. You get those nerves, kind of like,
of course,
sometimes. Now, one thing I learned with sports was I learned how to channel some of the crowd energy, and I was much better playing in front of large groups of people than I was with nobody in the stands. So I learned how to vibe off the crowd without worrying about people watching. I just felt that energy behind me. I think a lot of musicians get to a place where they're vibing with the crowd and they love it. But I think this drug use in alcohol use in music is a lot of times to overcome insecurities. And I think a lot of times people get into music through some of these experiences, and I think what can almost start as a way to get outside of unnatural inhibitions. I think this is why some people drink, is because I think maybe sometimes we're overly inhibited in our culture. So a little bit of alcohol gets us all, just follow me here, could almost get us a little bit more normal. But if we push it, then we're getting into really not caring what people think in a way that's not healthy. And I think that people just continue to up that up. They keep amping it up, and eventually people can barely function without all that stuff, and it consumes their lives. And it is really sad to see how many people die from, alcohol.
I remember feeling bad for Britney Spears when I was younger. I remember having it, and I probably do have some empathic energies within me. But I remember seeing other people laughing and slapping their knee and mocking her, and I was like, man, I think I just feel really bad for her right now. She's just, there's an energy there of, you're lost because you got what you wanted. And I started seeing from her and a few other famous people. I'm not going to start throwing names everywhere. Mm-hmm. But it's the brand of their lyrics and their songs becomes who they are. Mm-hmm. And then everything around them says, you got to keep making this more. And so their own id and their own self-preservation, self-presence, who they are in their family system, all that gets eschewed to the side because they got to keep branding that amazing rock star brand they have. And they got to keep going further and further into that stimulus of making the next best thing. And I think along the way, they have a lot of people to continue in that fame trajectory. They have to make these sacrifices, these little crossroads. And it's which one are you going to choose? Which one's important for you? So we love music. I love music. In fact, if I forget my headphones going to the gym or something, I've canceled workouts before. I'm like, man, I can't work out right now. I don't have my headphones. I can't. I mean, I've done it a few times, but seriously, do you ever train without music on?
I do. And sometimes I do purposely because I'm practicing the whole pratyahara thing from yoga where, and this is an interesting phenomenon, and for those of you that are watching this and don't know what pratyahara is, it means to withdraw the things that nourish the senses. So when you know, quit,
Nicely.
let's say I'm riding in my car and I always listen to music. Well, all of a sudden I'm just going to hit the power button and I'm going to start riding with no music for a day or two just to clear my head.
It changes everything up.
And then what happens in this practice of pratyahara is my mind starts writing music. That's when I become the most creative and write songs, is when I quit listening to everything else. Now,
well, your container got filled up too. Your container was filled up, and then it's able to be opened again with all that information you've been pouring in. And so it's like you shift the frequency and then kind of go into a creative process. I get what you're saying.
Exactly. So, so I think it's, you know, a wonderful thing. And I love to learn from other musicians, and you kind of start, whatever you listen to, you start kind of writing like that. If I listen to a whole bunch of Nirvana, then I turn it off for a few days and all of a sudden I start creating my own songs, but they sound kind of Nirvana-ish, right?
Well, the dude that does Starboy, and he has Michael Jackson moves in him. You can see a channeling. Certain contemporary artists have a little bit of that Prince energy in them, and how they sing or how they. And then in the hip hop, it's just amazing to me. I was thinking about football, and like how much the band is part of like a high school football game, and the pep rally. Remember the Friday pep rallies before the football games?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, how much music was like
the drumming,
right?
And I mean, it's funny because you know, back in the day when people were going to war, you had the drummers in the war. You know, you had.
I actually was just about to go there.
We're
hanging out right now, and the Redcoats are coming up the hill. In the faint distance, you hear this doom, or whatever song they're playing. That's not something to be excited about in a good way.
No, not at all.
That's something coming up the road that you better you have 10 minutes to prepare. Back in the day, 120 or 40 years ago, whatever, no, way more than that in most cases. Singing Bowl. Not getting into it, but that just admitted a frequency. In my spiritual meditation practice, I've been fortunate to discover a sound as such similar, but only from being still and knowing God is silent, knowing I'm one with the Father and quieting myself down. That yin energy, like you're talking about, just stilling the waters, calming everything down. If you can do that to whomever has taken this much time to listen to us talk about music, there's music within you that kind of wants to come out, and you can meditate and kind of alter your consciousness in a healthy way. Any meditation book talks about this. You kind of feel like a oneness come over your body, and just a sense of peace and bliss, a blissful consciousness. You'll be aware of your presence around you, but you will not feel threatened by it. You won't be asleep, but you're not completely awake. You're kind of aware of your surroundings, but you just want to stay there. It just feels really nice. I encourage you, whomever you are, to try to find that place. Last thing I'll say about that, and you have the floor there, but you need to feel, if you're ever going to do a meditation like that, you need to turn off your phone and silence your phone, perhaps lock your doors or whatever in your home to make you feel like no one can barge in on you. You don't want to think that someone can barge in on you. You want to have that, I'm in a peaceful self-care time and no one's going to interrupt me. And if you can pull all that off and then go into a really quiet, still place and say, God, talk to me, that's the best music you can ever hear right there, in my opinion. You know, a few times I almost heard some heavenly music and I was like, wow, if that makes sense. So you have the floor. Let's keep singing it on, man. Whatever, however you.
There's so many things. There's so many things. One thing I think about is how, like you were talking about in workouts, beats per minute refers to your tempo. So how fast things are going, right? Let's talk about the lifespan, because again, I work with older folks, and when we're young, our tempo to life as a child is much more like this. And we're not worried about what happened yesterday. We're not worried about what's going on tomorrow. And not only that, but it comes out in a child's curiosity. You know, I tell the older folks when I'm telling them this, I'm like, you know, a kid will come up to you and say, "Why is your hair gray? Will you take out your teeth again? How'd you lose that finger?" You know, and they're not worried about hurting feelings because they're so innocent, but they'll jump from one thing to the next, like right? Once we get older, our pace slows down, even with our walking, right? Again, our movement. Whether it's
everything.
our brains, whether it's how our brains are jumping around or we're physically jumping around. There's a difference between the beginning of life and the end of life like that. So one thing I express to the older folks is that if you do want to feel a little bit more youthful, get yourself moving a little more, of course, always safely. Get yourself moving a little more. Think about what is your tempo today. And another thing with tempo has to do with shifting, okay? Someone
What
that
has to do with,
sits
pardon me?
shifting.
Oh,
So imagine sitting in the chair for 4 hours before you shift up out of that to walk around. You're going to be, there's some lag time, let's say, right? If you've been watching television or the internet for 4 hours and you get up, you're going to be less outward because you're going to have been so introverted. You're going to be imbibing the images. And when you get up, you're going to still be kind of tranced and stunned, right? But what I'm getting at is shifting from one thing to the next. In fact, I've heard from some of the things I listen to about people that become very successful in life, one of the things they do is they work on something for 10 minutes and they shift to the next thing for 10 minutes, the next thing for 10 minutes, and they keep kind of rotating around all day long without staying terribly focused on any one thing for too long to get to the
that's
point of diminishing returns. Now, that said, there's also a value in being able to completely immerse yourself in something for like 4 hours.
Yeah, but the mode of operation habitually is kind of being eclectic and diverse. Like if you're doing multiple classes in graduate or PhD work, you have to shift from
Right.
12 different books at one time and 4 different classes and 12 different conversations.
Right.
And then somebody will say, you seem like you have a lot on your mind. And you're like, I need to go hang out by the lake and then have that yin. So talking about yin and yang, did I cut you off? Because I want to bring up worship
No, you're
music.
good, man. You're good.
I did a lot of church, especially in my 20s and early 30s. And if you sing those hymnals and you don't care about who's hearing you and you're in those pews and you just sing it, man, by the time you sit down for the minister to speak, you're like, oh, man, I sure was terrible, but it sure did feel good, whatever.
Yeah.
Because everyone else is yelling and singing too, so you can sing too. And you let it out.
Yeah.
I want to bring up oxytocin, the 5th chakra, how it's related to the sacral chakra, number 2, and how especially women experience more of a dosage release in their body, if you will, of oxytocin through verbal dialogue. And men they experience an oxytocin dump to that equivocal amount through touch. Women get equivocally stimulated just through verbal dialogue to an extent to where the man would be that same amount stimulated through being touched. So a man that can calm his temperament of not wanting touch and just dialogue with his girlfriend or companion is actually satiating her in a phenomenal way. And so music would seem to do that. If you're a vocalist and you're singing, you're releasing through your 5th chakra. And many of the textbooks say that if and when you release through the 5th energy center, it naturally will balance the sacral energy center, which is your creative and sexual energy center. So anytime someone's having an emotional of any sort, if they're able to get a safe space to talk about it and express and share, it will naturally balance them. It'll be like an unconscious balancing. If you verbal spar with them, but just sit with them, let them speak.
Yeah, they call the whole venting phenomenon is it's.
And I feel that sometimes. I'll call my dad. I'm like, yo, man, this isn't gonna make a lot of sense, but I just got to vent.
Well, and I think that there's a healthy venting and then a way of which it can be unhealthy, and I think it goes from private to public. Okay, like well, of course, all we see in social media and stuff is. A lot of it isn't so much people really being negative as it is they're venting. And if we don't vent it, if we don't get it out, if we don't journal it, if we don't have a trusted person to chat with, then people post about it. And I think, again, like I was talking about music, when we're venting in music or poetry and then putting it out there, those become 2 different things. And I think there's something to be said about how we use our therapy, publicly. Like, I think
it's phenomenal to be a neutral energy whenever there's a person venting and say, like, from all the life energy coaching I've done.
Yeah.
And someone's really pissed about something. And I'm like, I'm choosing neutral. I'm going to hear them, but I'm not going to tell them what they need to do. I'm going to be neutral. And if you just sit with them for 7 to 10 minutes, 9 times out of 10, they're like, you know what? Thank you for listening to me.
Right.
I really feel a lot better. And you're like, man, in your mind, you're like, I didn't really do anything except not judge you when you spoke to me.
And I
I
think
didn't
that's a
try to
big
fix
deal.
you.
It's a
Right. It's
it's a
so important to be neutral when you have a moment, a person stimulated and they can't
right,
control their energy. It's
right,
so important to try to be neutral
right.
and silent, if you will. Go ahead. I just wanted to share that.
Well, yeah, I think that that whole what's positive versus what's negative, I think that's another fallacious dichotomy sometimes, and that sometimes in order to stay positive, a person has to get that junk out of them. It's almost like it's almost like going to
Well,
the bathroom or something, except it's verbal and it's emotional, and you don't want to do that all over everybody.
when we talk about the chakras, Joseph, and
Yeah,
anytime I teach people about the energy centers on the men's retreats we've done with clients I coach and they're interested in learning about this work, 9 times out of 10, the first thing they do is like, well, which one of mine's broke? How can I fix it? Because they're in this dichotomous or this mindset of
right.
it's now how, and I'm like, it's about it being overcharged or undercharged, and you need to
Mhm.
bring balance to it.
Right.
And they're like,
Right.
oh, you mean I'm not messed up? I'm like, no, you're not messed up. These are just 7 energy centers on your body, and one can try to get too intense or it can get a little too lethargic.
Right.
And I think that's why you're so attracted to your gerontological work with
Mhm.
the assisted living communities. You see a level of lethargy and
Mhm.
tired, and you
Mhm.
can go in and add a little music and conversation, and you see perks, you see
Yeah.
reciprocity, you see people
Right.
kind of wake up, you see the Holy Spirit kind of wake them up and shook them a little bit, and you're like,
Mhm.
yes, I just did
Right.
something good. So
Yeah.
I encourage you to keep doing that. What do you want to say? I have one more point to make, man.
Um. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just thinking about the music itself. To each person, I encourage to not judge other people's genre of music. For years, I've always kind of made fun of country music
Mhm.
just because I was brought up in the South, but not from the South, maybe. I went to
Right.
Nashville and lived for whatever reason. And lately, I'm like, man, I can't be. Some country music's awesome. I can't judge country music. Some people might like death metal or heavy metal or hip
Mhm.
hop. It's not my place to think who needs what. For your own kids, great. But we don't know who needs what when it comes to their music preference or their silence. And most times it brings people together. When I went through my breakup in Denver and I was hurt emotionally, so usually when someone breaks up, their third chakra where their ego is existing, it gets hurt. It's like, what, me? What? Hold on. I'm an exception to that rule. So I was doing some breathing exercise I was taught in Ishinryu Karate, Okinawan Karate. I was doing San Chin. And I actually, from the breathing exercises, tore my solar plexus. Do you remember
Mhm.
when I tore my solar plexus?
I remember you. Yeah, I remember this. Yes.
And I couldn't breathe or anything. I did it myself by just doing a breathing exercise, but I was angry. So I overcharged and tore my energy. And it was pretty injured. And I was like, man, this is pretty serious. And I went to my studies and I started researching it. And I was like, I used to play chakra healing music years ago.
Mhm.
And so guys, this works. This is probably the, we're closing soon, I assume, but this is probably the most important thing I have to say today.
Mhm.
Every morning for 2 or 3 months when I was having my coffee, I'd pull up my music on my YouTube and
Mhm.
I'd type in solar plexus chakra music.
Mhm.
And we didn't talk about hertz as much as we could. I could get really dorky on hertz right now, the
Mhm.
frequency and wavelengths.
Right.
But I'm just
Right.
saying each one has a different wah 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 wah. They all have a different one of those frequencies.
Right.
And so you put on that music and it's in the background, it's in your ambient background, you're having coffee, and it's like, whoa, you can feel it start to heal.
Mhm.
I experienced the healing from the audio sound in that specific energy center.
Yes.
Oh, over time, I was like, all right, well, that seems good. Let's see what heart chakra healing music sounds like. And
Mhm.
I could sense the difference. And
Mhm.
then I started playing
Mhm.
around with them and I could start, what kind of mood am I in? Do I want to study right now? Do I want to relax? And you can start feeling, if you put it on the base chakra healing music. And
Right.
there's a plethora of videos.
Mhm.
You sense it really start to root you and ground you.
Mhm.
So I encourage anyone listening, where are they over or undercharged in their body? Do a little research and put on some music or pick up an instrument that relates to that energy center, which we'll cover another time. And you can
Mhm.
heal yourself. You can
Mhm.
heal yourself with music. And it
Mhm.
basically happens all the time.
Yeah.
So that's
It
where I'm with it.
and I think that this fifth chakra it's about self-expression, and this is music is one of the ways we express ourselves. And one of the things about music is that music isn't just the notes played, but it's also the space between the notes. It's the silence between
Good point.
that also makes the music. So a lot of health in the fifth chakra also comes from what is not said, where you hold your tongue, so to speak, because we know the danger sometimes of just saying what's on our mind, just saying how we feel, venting in the wrong way, even being honest in the wrong way. You know, well, that's just how I feel. You're a terrible person. I'm just telling you the truth. Or you look terrible in those clothes. That's just the way I feel. I'm just being truthful. So we can actually hurt people sometimes by the way we even can convey something that's true. And we have to be careful about that. There's a lot of talk sometimes about how we got to just tell the truth regardless of people's feelings about it. And I think that's a little bit crude, and that we should always consider people's feelings. That said, we can't let somebody's feelings dictate completely our conveyance of truth, because some people just, you know, we all oftentimes don't want to hear some piece of truth that's going to challenge us or make us need to change. So
that's to each their own. We know what the Bible says
oops.
about the tongue and how dangerous the tongue is, Joseph, right? And you got to be very careful with what you choose to speak and not speak. I did work with some academic elites that their traps were so drawn back,
yeah,
their rhomboids, because they didn't speak. And their professional position did not allow them to speak. And they were having neck and shoulder issues. So if you do have trap, rhomb, and neck issues, rhomboid issues, I would encourage you to be more effectual in your communication and more truth speaking. Go ahead, but not to hurt and hinder, to build and uplift.
So the other thing,
the
other thing about this chakra and this speaking is there are words and there is energy under the words. You can say the same word in 4 or 5 different ways, and you're conveying 4 or 5 different feelings, different frequencies into people. So I think that's really important to realize that it's not always the word itself, but the energy conveyed.
You want to use the example and just say, "Hey, Nicholas." Say it to me.
Hey, Nicholas.
What's up? Say it to me again.
Hey, Nicholas.
What's up?
Hey, Nicholas.
And that's just like, you know, see what I'm saying?
I do.
Hello, and the tone. And if we're going to talk about verbal communication,
mm-hmm.
Well, you know, a high percentage of it has nothing to do with the words at all, you know, and it's more about the tone.
Yes. And
the appearance that's being conveyed with that word being spoken. So that's very significant. Now, stay on the point of music here and healing. Where do you want to go, man? We're good. This is a good conversation.
Maybe the last thing I'd bring up is timing. We talked about baseball a minute ago. One of the things about baseball, you got to get your timing down. Timing. To be a good musician, you have to stay in time. One of the worst things you can do is get out of time with your band, because then things are off, right? Now, there is this phenomenon that's happened in music over the past, 20, 30 years, where with so much music now being created digitally, it's almost like the beats are so perfect that it loses some of what we call in music the feel. A drummer has it's called a pocket, and the pocket, being in the pocket, doesn't mean you're exactly on the same point all the time. Sometimes it's good to be at the front end of the pocket, sometimes at the back end of the pocket. So instead of there being an exact place you hit, there's a very small range. And like John Bonham was a great drummer, and if you listen to his drumming up against a click track, you know, it's not perfect. And our ears now, as a society, are conditioned to hear so much music that's artificially created that when we pop on something that's like old school, like a record, which is more of what we call analog, right? Digital has like fake spaces, but how do you say it? Digital's like, instead of a motion picture, it's a whole bunch of frames put together to look like a motion picture. And when you listen to analog music, it's so cool because
I didn't know this.
There,
you may be pointing to you actually have a different energetic experience if you sit and listen to vinyl versus listen to a freaking in whatever kind of audio downloaded through your phone.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think about that. And I do get what you mean by the pocket. If I were to use a baseball analogy about the drummer,
Mhm.
if I'm going to hit an inside pitch and pull it, or if I'm going to hit an opposite
That's
field,
right. Yeah.
if it's
Right.
outside and I go, but I'm still getting a good piece of the ball.
That's right. Right.
I'm real fast through the beat, or I'm letting it travel and let it go where it needs to go.
Right.
I've always been intrigued by music. I've just never taken off and really devoted to it. So anytime I'm around some talented musicians or anyone even trying, there's an appealing energy there. I love it. And I use music all the time, if you will, in my profession.
Mhm.
So even to the point of switching from, I do have one more point about my kids, if I could remember. Switching from the hard 125 beats or more per music, and then right at the end of class, sometimes for stretching, put on meditation music. And you'll notice that people leave in a different mood when I put on the relaxing music at the end of session. They'll calm down and linger and hang out and socialize more instead of oosh, oosh, oosh. So a lot of times for breakfast, I put on classical music and we hang out and eat, and the kids are very chill. The other morning, for some random experiment, I was like, I've typed in dance party hits, dance party mix, like beach dance party mix.
Yeah. Right.
Like,
Yeah.
the kids couldn't even finish their
Yeah.
cereal.
Right.
They were like a little mosh pit in here, and they just went crazy. I didn't say anything. I just put the music on instead of classical, and they went berserk dancing. And I had to change it before they'd finish their breakfast to show the impact of music, just sitting there and creating an ambiance. Thank you for this conversation today, man. This has been good.
It has been, man. I appreciate it. And I look forward to our next conversation, man. And enjoy your afternoon, and we'll be in touch soon.
Absolutely, man. Take care, Joey. Have a good one. Enjoy your day.
You too, man. All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.